419 with Gretchen DeBacker, Matt Killam, and Kevin Mullen.
Welcome into a Tuesday edition of the 419, powered by WGTE, presented by Witro Wealth Management. I'm Kevin Mullen, alongside
Gretchen DeBacker.
Matt Killam. Good job, Gretchen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sometimes I say alongside, sometimes I just, I kind of a comma.
We're off and running.
Yeah, it's great. We obviously the intro to the show is something that we haven't talked about yet, and we're a month in, and I know I've sent a message to the person that created that for us, but I want to take a moment just on the show to kind of talk about the origin of that, and also just give a huge shout out and thank you, Jameel Aussie, an incredibly talented producer. I feel confident that he would say, of everything he's ever done, this is his best work.
If you compare his work with Beyonce,
yeah,
and then with me, I don't know how he's telling the difference, because we're so similar.
Yeah, I was thinking the same
in
thing.
In style and in talent.
That's right. You're carbon-based. End of list.
But yeah, so I do want to tell some of the story behind this guy. I think it's interesting that reached out to Jameel saying, hey, we got this partnership with WGTE. We want to sort of evolve our. We had the same theme for 2 years on the podcast.
Which is just me weeping.
That's right. And so reached out and said, hey, would you be interested in doing this? And he, responded right away, which first of all, is just a really cool thing to be able to text someone with that kind of resume and star power.
And you're not used to people responding that quickly to you.
No, you guys don't respond that quickly to me, and you guys haven't done anything cool.
That's right.
And so, sorry, Matt, I was talking about Gretchen.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's right.
And so he agreed right away. He was like, yeah, I'm in. I'll do it. Sends me the demo, and then included this joke part at the beginning because he wanted me to hit play and then just be like, oh God, that's terrible, right? No.
We fell for it.
And so I decided to play the same joke on you guys, and I sent it. And Gretchen responded in all caps with 18 exclamation points. I love it. Yeah. And then didn't even make it to the real song.
Did I respond?
I thought that was it.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Matt did not respond.
Yeah.
I still don't know.
We have a theme song on the show that plays.
We're doing
at
a
the
show?
intro.
But it is great. So the kind of the vocal, and now the 419 is really cool. And then of course the actual song that he produced for us, you'll hear throughout the show behind some of our sponsors and promos and things like that. So it is still what he intended to be on the show is still incorporated. But it's great. So a huge shout out and thank you to Jameel.
And a local talent, to your point.
Yeah, we had him on the podcast, and I remember asking him, and I've asked a few people this question, why do you live in Toledo, right? You could live anywhere. And quite honestly, I gotta believe his career would take a different direction or a different trajectory if he was in LA or New York or Nashville or some Atlanta, some music city. But he raises a family here and chooses the lifestyle that Toledo gives. Yeah. And I think that's important. So I want to caution myself saying hey, he'd be more successful if he was somewhere else.
Sure. Because
success is defined differently for everybody.
That's right.
And I think when you look at it and say, hey, I want to live in a community where I can raise a family safely, I can know my neighbors, and I can, make really almost anything happen. And oh, by the way, he still gets a chance to work with Eminem, Beyonce, and a ton of other artists that I don't know their names, but a huge Steely Dan, that's right. I think he produced the beats.
I will tell you, he also has the best eyebrows in Northwest Ohio, and I don't mind saying it on the show today.
There's no competition.
Well, there's some.
Thanks, Gretchen.
You're welcome.
All right.
The best color person in the
It's a Tuesday edition of the 419. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Zachary Huber from the Toledo Lucas County Public Library. It's part of our conversation. We try to have conversations with folks making a real impact in our community. The Community Foundation supports us in doing that, and we're excited to have that conversation with Zachary when we come back on the other side of this break. It's the 419. We'll be right back.
Support for the 419 comes from Witro Wealth Management, where we understand that your financial path is personal. Advisory services are offered through Capital Investment Advisory Services, LLC. Securities offered through Capital Investment Group, Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. More information at witroadvisors.com.
The 419, powered by WGTE, is made possible in part by supporters like you. Thank you.
Introducing The Local Thread, a community news series uniting voices and storytellers from across the region. In partnership with La Prensa, the Toledo Free Press, the Sojourner's Truth, Toledo Public Schools, and veteran journalist Jerry Anderson. The Local Thread brings you stories and conversations that connect our community. Hear it weeknights at 7 on FM 91 with early access on podcast platforms each morning. The Local Thread, only on WGTE.
Welcome back into the 419, powered by WGTE. Our friends over the Community Foundation are helping us tell stories with folks that are making a real impact in our community. We're pleased to be joined by an individual who's doing just that, Zach Huber from the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Tell us, I know you've had a couple different roles at the library, but let's talk about what is your current title and current role at the library?
Yeah, so just 6 months ago I started as a department manager at the main library. My department's fact and fiction, so I'm in charge of all facts and I'm in charge of all fiction.
That is a big responsibility. Yeah, which one do you prefer?
I prefer the fiction side.
Yeah,
is
sure.
what most people are coming for anyway.
That's right, they're starting to blend anyway.
Yeah.
Just on the literary side.
Right, exactly. But no, that is the, if you've gone to main library, it's the back portion of the building where majority of the collection is. If people are just coming in to browse and check out books, that's my area.
Very nice.
What drew you to that role in that position?
So, and it's very much traditional, like librarianship. You know, the reference questions that you're getting, the research, the portion that you would immediately think of a library. That's kind of where I wanted to come back to. I spent about 6 years doing some specialty work in the small business and nonprofit department, and it was time for that change up, but also kind of that coming back to where it all started for me.
Can you talk in general about what someone has access to when they have a library card?
So that is a big question. So when someone has a library card, not only do they have access to everything that we think of with books, but they're going to have access to a lot of specialty knowledge with our team. They're also going to have access to a lot of specialty services. So for example, just in my department, we have the home delivery service. So if someone can't make it to any of our branches for any medical reason, they can sign up for a delivery every month. They have access to our computers, the internet, copying, faxing, all of those components, but also some of those other services like our local history and genealogy group, our small business and nonprofit department. So there's a lot of different specialty departments just at main library alone that whole world opens up to them.
It's, our library is Sanger, and we also love going downtown to the main library as well. But like when my kids were younger, I felt like we would visit libraries like amusement parks, right? That it was like this destination visit because they all sort of have their own personality, right? So we'd go out to the King Library in Sylvania because the kids section there is just unique and really cool. We'd go downtown. But my kids love going to the library. I appreciate that there are no longer late fees because at least one of my negligent monsters will leave it under his bed and we'll find it a month and a half later.
Sure.
But I mean each of them take a reusable bag to the library, and I swear each kid's walking out with 15 books every time, and it is amazing.
Yeah, so one of my favorite questions to answer is, how many books am I allowed to check out? And the answer is the limit does not exist. So they can check out as many books as they want.
How fun is that? That's exact opposite of how we answer that question at the Metro Park system.
About books?
You can take nothing out.
Oh, true.
Zach, where are you from? How'd you get into this line of work? Why is this, obviously this works for you. How'd you get to there and why is that true?
Yeah, so I actually spent most of my life so far in the 419. I was originally from a small town called Coldwater, Ohio.
I love Coldwater.
Really? You know Coldwater?
I spend a lot of my springs there. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to believe that for a second.
Yeah,
but.
I like, do you know the Smiths?
I have heard of them.
They are so kind.
They are very kind people.
All right, so for those of us that aren't familiar with, So I know Coldwater, Michigan.
Yeah. So like I said,
It's
very
south
small.
of that.
It's still a village.
Yeah.
So it's in Mercer County, so very close to the Indiana border, but still in the 419. And I went to college at Ohio University, so briefly left with the 419. But I actually studied magazine journalism, very specifically magazine journalism.
And what a growth industry.
Right, and that's why I am where I am. No, I went into newspaper layout design for a couple of years after I graduated, and it wasn't for me. It was second shift work. It was all it was very hard to connect with the community that I had just moved
absolutely.
into. So I walked in. I was living in Indiana. I walked into the library there, and I was like, "This feels right."
Cool.
So I moved back
Where
home.
in Indiana?
Anderson, Indiana. So pretty
I go from Coldwater to Anderson.
your
Indiana.
favorite two places. You've been following me my
The
whole life.
spring, summer. Yeah, I
You
summer
don't
in
realize how
Anderson.
much he
Yeah.
follows you.
Yeah. Do you know the Smiths?
I'm going to check my social media later.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
There's
Yeah.
a real feud between the Coldwater Smiths and the Anderson
Not well.
Smiths.
I can tell you whose fault that is, but that's a different show.
There's a big divide there.
Yeah, it's the Indiana Smiths. What an uppity group of jerks.
So walk
your
into
words, Zach.
the library in Indiana, and you're like, I'm home.
Yeah, it was nice to see how alive it was. And so Anderson as a community had obviously experienced, a little bit of that Rust Belt experience as well. And so it was nice to walk into that space and see, a buzz with the community, even in a slightly depressed area. And so I moved back to Ohio. I originally kind of set my sights on that, but started with nonprofit work. Worked in Findlay, working for an arts nonprofit while I got my Master's of Library Science, and then hopped over to the University of Findlay for a little bit, and then this position opened up, and it was so perfect because it was libraries, but it was serving nonprofits that I had just worked in.
Zach, your folks are community-oriented. They are in the nonprofit business. What is your upbringing that kind of pushed you into this, or made you want to do this as a result of rebelling against them? What's that?
Sure. So when I worked for that small nonprofit in Findlay, it was one of those experiences where everybody did everything. There were only four of us, so we all had to learn how to do everything. And so I loved that, and I really wanted to take that experience and find ways to help other organizations leverage their community resources. And not everyone thinks of a library as offering that very specific set of resources, but that is honestly, when you boil everything down, no matter what, a library is connecting people to resources. And it was then my job to connect people to those specific things that might help them, find, create a database of people to fundraise for, or what were those, grants that they could go seek through our grants database. So it was, again, just connecting people to the right resources through the lens that I had with that nonprofit experience.
I think I was thinking of a library, like we had this conversation with, with Adam Levine about, the
What a
museum.
waste of time.
And I think about the museum as sort of being this place that just has old things, right? That it isn't about innovation or kind of looking forward. It's just about this time capsule in the past. And I think it's easy to think of a library just as a bunch of shelves with books. And then and I felt that way until really when we moved back to Toledo, probably about 10, almost 15 years ago. I think I interacted with and started to pay attention to the small business services that the library provides. And I've got a number of nonprofit clients that rely on going there and getting help with finding those donor databases. Talk to me a little bit about that department and those services that people may not
Also,
realize.
is it unique to Lucas County? I mean, I love our branch. I think the leadership is exceptional. I love the Lucas County library system, and I might not be familiar with others. Is that a unique offering to our library system, or is that sort of ubiquitous?
I would say it is, the version that we have is pretty unique.
Cool.
So we were part of a cohort across the country with urban libraries and their business services. And so we were uniquely lucky to not be tied to working a reference desk, a service desk, and being able to meet one-on-one with people.
Yeah.
That felt like it was the most unique component across the board. You'll usually only find this service at urban libraries.
Okay.
There's not a lot of capacity at smaller libraries. But most of them still had to juggle other things, and so we had a dedicated team toward that. And so, and again, just kind of expanding on that idea of meeting one-on-one, that's what we would do is set up a time with folks, because we knew that the conversation wasn't going to be here's a quick recommendation and you're on your way. It was going to be a whole conversation that was going to take time to explain, and I always saw that as the benefit. It is a scary thing to start, whether it's a business or a nonprofit, or even if you already have one, it's a scary thing to navigate. And so we were the people who knew the language, who knew the terminology, and could explain things in a way that was going to make sense to someone who just had never done that before. Even something as simple as starting an LLC, not the most complicated thing to do once you know how to do it. Not
still
the most
a step.
exactly.
Right, and the barrier, that the legalese of that. Gretchen is an attorney, allegedly, but that is intimidating.
Right, and it opens you up to a lot of potential scams. And once you open something like that, it is all public record, and you're going to get something in the mail that looks very convincing. So we get to be the people that say, don't do that. That is not something that you're going to want to follow up on.
Yeah.
That is just something that looks like they're trying to get to.
I'll tell you what, I was helped out early on, and that's why I knew that the Nigerian prince that I was funding was legit.
Yeah,
that is good.
right.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, the number of, when I started my first LLC, the number of letters that I got in the mail telling me that I have to post
They come right away.
some sort of employment disclosure, safety, flyer, something in the break room. And I'm like, what do you mean break room? Like, I'm working out of my house.
Right.
And it's just me. Like, what employees need to know that, this is a safe workplace, or like,
Right, you're trying to run your business. You don't have time to figure out all those little things that could pop up that might be a little scary. So,
what did a typical day look like for you in that role?
So when we first started out, it was completely one-on-one based. We were just appointments or potentially walk-ins. But over the years, we tried to build some additional components to that. So we started to go to branches and offer appointments at branches. But what we saw was, it was working. Our numbers grew every single year. We were serving about 1,200 people that first year. And there was just 2 of us. And then it grew the last year, so that I moved just over this last year to my new position, and we were serving 4,400 people between our classes, our one-on-ones, our partnership events. So the need was very much there, but what we saw was we needed a stable home base. So about 2 years ago, we took a space at Main Library and made it the small business and nonprofit workspace. So that became the home where people could come for that service, and we could have our partner organizations come in and also offer their services. So it just kind of spiraled.
Do you have a favorite nonprofit or a small business that's now running that you helped get started?
Yeah, so I have my favorites.
Amazon.
Because yes, like I can claim that. No. I have my favorites because that we did spend a lot of time with people. One that I think I would draw attention to is Families for Fitness. They were a really small organization that came about, and her name is Marcia, and we've talked about her in the past with some of our publications before. And Marcia came in, and she had just gotten a grant, but that was about as far as she had gotten, and she knew that she needed to learn how to do it on her own. She had some outside help with that. And so we had countless one-on-one sessions on going through the steps of that.
At the risk of putting you on the spot, where is the boundary of your role? Meaning, you had to have gotten a business come in or a business suggestion that made no sense on paper or even in the market, in your opinion. What is your role of and when does it begin and end saying this doesn't make any sense to me and you should not do this?
That's a really good question, honestly,
I didn't hear what you
because
said.
it is
What did you
hard.
just say?
It's a really good question. It is hard to navigate that, actually, because so we're librarians at the core. We are not business advisors. So everything that we would do, we would try to tie it to something else. And so we had these expert ways of making that conversation happen. So a lot of it was around creating a business plan. And so if we could point them to the right thing that says, okay, well, maybe these numbers aren't aligning, or the research
You're
really
familiar
isn't
with the
there.
color red, right?
Right. So we would lean on the work that's already out there in the world to try to help that conversation. And I'm not an expert. There might be something that I don't understand that's going to be the next big thing. So it's also not my job to say no, but it's my job to lead people to the information.
The tool.
Yeah, exactly, to make that decision.
Such a unique perspective on right? I mean, you think about, you know, the library has all the answers, right? They're all there, and you're saying, well, it's not my job to know all the answers. It's my job to point you to them.
Yeah, there's a building full of answers.
Yeah, that's right. And so, but the idea of, I'm not going to tell you that's a bad business idea. I'm just going to kind of help you walk down the road. And if we get there together, we do. I got to believe, like, what is there a, just, I see the number of food trucks that are popping up. Like, I feel like that, is that kind of a common, like, hey, I want to start a food truck? Is it is there a type of business?
It came in waves. It peaked definitely at kind of the tail end of like the COVID-19 era, for obvious reasons. And so, yeah, it's always been one of those staple businesses, but that was also one where we also try to make people realize that it's incredibly difficult to do, because it does have a startup cost that you don't think of, but also you're very limited. And if your truck breaks down, there goes your revenue. So again, we kind of lean into that business plan a little bit. But yeah, that one popped up a lot. There were certain businesses that a lot of times you could see it was someone's good heart trying to step in and create something for the community, but maybe it wasn't right for them.
Tell us one, if I was spending a weekend in Coldwater, Ohio, what's a can't miss experience in Coldwater?
Oh God! Well, from the metro parks, there's a pretty good park in Coldwater.
Yeah, you've never been to a real park, kid.
All right, so let's take a break. When we come back, I want to talk. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about your previous role. I want to talk about more about your current role and really what that looks like day to day, and then also kind of just looking to the future of the library, where from your seat where you see this going, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about Coldwater, Ohio as well.
It's
Of
gonna be
course,
a
let you
whole
guys duke it out over the best parks in Northwest Ohio.
Yeah, well, I've got the trophy to prove it.
Well, that's true. And you know what? Let's talk about some awards too, because I know the library has won a couple of those. So we'll do that and more when we come back on the 419.
To me, community means connecting to others.
I'm Donnie Miller, and welcome to The Point.
I love CBS Kids!
We're a community committed to education. Discover new ideas, dive into exciting subjects, and engage with the world around you.
I would send them personally a t-shirt. Crime doesn't pay in the old West End, pass it on. That's how we cleaned up the neighborhood.
Vision loss for people is not the end.
It's a story. It's the next chapter.
WGTE Public Media invites you to Get Out and Play Day.
Monday through Friday, it's the 419 powered by WGTE. With Matt Killam, Gretchen DeBacker, I'm Kevin Mullen. What can people expect on the show?
It's going to be an hour, a reminder of why this is a great place to live, work, and play.
WGTE, where you come to watch, listen, and learn.
Welcome back into the 419. We're talking to Zach Huber, the Fact and Fiction Manager at the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library. Your previous role is where you and I interacted quite a bit, working with small businesses and nonprofits. You talked about some of the organizations that you really liked. I mean, from a partnership standpoint, this obviously wasn't work you guys were doing alone. Who were some of the partners in the community that are helping do that work? Yeah,
and I actually would love to draw attention to the ecosystem that was in the Toledo community for businesses. It's very unique to this space. So we would work with this group originally called the Business Growth Collaborative, and that had a number of partner organizations, and I think we interacted through Jumpstart originally because they had a cohort of pitching competitions. And so we had this network where we knew, and that was actually the leveraging point for us, is we could make referrals to these organizations, and we all had our own areas of expertise. So we might have someone who would come in with the business plan and they would need to work on their financials. Well, again, we're librarians, I'm not an accountant. So we would send them over to Small Business Development Center at the Chamber of Commerce to work with someone on their financials. So that ecosystem allowed us to automatically plug into all of those services, and really the library ended up being like that entry point into it. They would start with us because we were gonna kind of honestly weed out a little bit of it before someone shouldn't automatically start at one of those organizations. They should maybe have done a little pre-work first. So a lot of groups would start with us and they would then enter into that ecosystem.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's Jumpstart was where we first connected. I loved that organization, and I think the work they were doing was so needed in our community. And I think, you know, it's an area where we've sort of struggled as a community to figure out how we hold and kind of maintain and fund that kind of work. But my first interaction with that was watching Jira Stewart pitch her vision for Jira's Heavenly Suite to break out of the basement of 1 Seagate, get her own space.
And she's almost single-handedly killing my stepdad.
Yes.
She's on Bancroft.
Within walking distance.
And he walks to it on a daily basis. He's probably there right now. So the new role, I'm interested in how this functions, right? So again, repeat the title.
Manager of Fact and Fiction. So that's the department. I mean, it used to be.
That covers everything. It's a big
It is
gig.
all things. So it used to be 2 separate departments before we renovated in 2019. So you could think of it as the humanities desk, and then the business technology science desk became one. So that was the fact and the fiction.
Sure.
That made that.
That's exactly how I think of it anyway.
Business was the fiction part.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's well said. How does all this work on a daily basis? I think people, walk into a library and just see everything out, but how does it get there? How do you make decisions annually on what should be there, potentially what shouldn't, what's mothballed? How do you decide those things?
It takes a lot of folks, and especially at Main Library, it takes a lot of folks. But it's changed over the years. So once upon a time, librarians were making those individual purchase decisions for their library, but now it's all centralized. So we actually have two people who work in collection development at Main Library who do a lot of that purchasing. So they are making those I would not easy decisions. It's not easy, but the ones that we would know we would purchase no matter what. Your James Pattersons, but they rely on the librarians who are talking to our customers to hear a lot of those materials and make those suggestions. So it's really it's the public that's informing that.
Interesting.
We also love our local authors. Those are easy adds to our collection. And then, of course, the opposite of getting books is how do we get rid of books? And so some things over the years are just a little less loved, a little less well known, and they naturally go. But at Maine, we have that extra space that we get to keep a lot of those things. So we'll have books back from the 1800s, and we have two secret levels of basement storage below the building that are just, again, full of those books that people might need for research, but maybe have seen better days and shouldn't be maybe handled a lot.
What are you seeing in the difference between traditional book and the audiobooks, which you can get through your app, which I love, and check those out? Are you seeing growth in the audio book side?
So e-media, so that will cover both audiobooks and ebooks. It has increased over the years, but it seems to have kind of plateaued a little bit at a certain percentage, and I think that's around 30 to 40% of people use that. When I'm working with customers at the library, we'll go through our catalog, and a lot of times the people who are physically there in the building might not be interested in the e-media. I might say, we don't have that title, but we do have an audiobook, but they might not be interested in that because they wanted to get that physical copy. So it just depends on the person. But yeah, about 30 to 40% people.
Are you I imagine you're an avid reader.
Mm-hmm.
How about
do you have to say that contractually?
I do. Yeah, it's part of the job.
Yeah, sure.
About how many books are you tearing through in a year?
So I have to say I love a large book. So I don't get through as many because of that. I like to get those books where you dive into that world building.
Yeah. Didn't realize you were the head of the excuses department.
Now you know. So I usually set my goal around 50 books a year.
Good Lord, that's me too. Yep, that's.
But there's only 52 weeks in the year.
I love that you qualified this with "I don't get through that many books," and then said 50.
You haven't read 50 in your lifetime.
I thought that was. I didn't know there were 50 books total.
You got to come in.
How dare you?
That's my reading goal, but I also often have to do books for our book clubs, which we have a number of book clubs through the library, and so I'm one of the leads for the horror book club.
Oh, cool.
And then sometimes I'll sub for one of my staff members at the coffee shop book club. Very different books.
A horror genre that you're particularly inclined, is that something you read? on your own?
It's actually a growing, like a trending topic right now. Like people love horror and romance right now. Maybe not together, but maybe.
Those are often the same thing.
Yeah.
That actually explains.
Right, that's right. Yeah, those are kissing cousins. The title of my favorite book.
We might need to get Kel2 Collective to come back on and address that.
We've asked this for a number of people that have come on that have a certain expertise. Is there a national group that you look for in terms of, I guess trends feels like a lame way to ask it, but it's the only way I know how to. For national library trends or what the collection should look like, what is the pantheon or gold standard that you look?
Yeah, there are a lot of organizations. Some of that stuff with like collection development, those standards have been around for decades, and it's usually individual to what you want the collection to be. But we have the ALA, the American Library Association, and they has many sub-organizations like the Public Library Association, which is kind of where I spend a lot of my time. And then we also have a great state-level organization, the Ohio Library Council. And because of our size, there's the Urban Library Council. So like the librarianship field, we love a group.
Yeah, sure.
So there's a lot for us to stay in touch with, and it has to do with your individual work.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And also, I'll do the bragging for you. In terms of a gold standard, our library system represents that. You have a pretty impressive piece of hardware that you've won in the last few years. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we won the national award, which is through the Institute of Museum and Library Science, and we only a couple libraries are awarded, and museums are awarded that every year, and so we won.
Where do you get it?
The IMLS is it's located in Washington D.C. And it's I think we won the medium size award. So pretty special.
Yes.
And very few receive that award ever, especially in any given year.
And it is awarded to the institution by the president, by the first lady,
it's through the federal government. So it is the president.
Why are libraries in this climate and their welcoming position important in the world?
Yeah. Libraries are and will hopefully always be that third space. So it doesn't matter who you are to come into our building and use our services, and it's almost like a natural equalizer. We're all in that building.
Have you read that book?
The Equalizer?
Yeah,
is it a book? I didn't even know it was a book.
I don't know either. But it's a great series of movies.
I promise you, there is a book titled The Equalizer.
Yeah.
I'm sure
have you read Teen Wolf 2?
I have not. That's not on my list.
That was a book first?
Yeah, of course it was.
But we
called Crime and Punishment.
Not only are we a host to outside organizations, but we do have our own programming. But something that I always like to tell people is, I believe this came out in the late 90s, the book Bowling Alone, and then the documentary that was made off of it, Join or Die, really about the decline of civic participation and how that has separated us. And so I see libraries as the solution, one of the solutions to that. Not everyone has the ability to pay to join a bowling league, which is what Bowling Alone is about. So we have those programs that anyone can come to, and we're not going to charge for anyone to attend those. And like I said, also open to outside organizations.
You guys are an incredibly welcoming organization in our community. Doors are open for everybody. Part of what makes you so welcoming is just how kind-hearted, I think, certainly you, Zach, and everybody at the library have had great interactions. One of our requirements on this show is that you have to show your hospitality in physical form, and you must give us a gift.
Right.
And I understand that you brought a gift.
I do, yes.
As is your appropriate payment to be on the show.
All right, the unboxing.
Oh yeah, we'll give it to you since you're dressed like Santa.
Yay!
So you get your very own winter reed hat.
Now this is going to go in my head and not on the shelf.
You know what? It matches.
It does.
All you have to do is sign up for Winter Read and you'll get another one. So.
Is that true? Tell us briefly what Winter Read is.
So Winter Read and then the complimentary Summer Read program.
Nice hat.
So everyone that signs up for either of those, you get an automatic registration prize, which is what this hat is.
Nice.
And it changes from program to program. But we just want to get folks to read.
Yeah.
And so all you have to do for the Winter Read is read 2 books by the end of February, and then you're entered for additional prizes.
So you have to read.
You do have to. It could be an audiobook.
Okay, good. Where can people get information about all of these programs?
So it's going to be on our website, ToledoLibrary.org.
Great website.
We have a number of tabs, and under we have programs and services will probably be the primary ones, as well as a research tab for people who are looking for that as well.
Thank
All right,
you so
Zach,
much.
it's now time for Gretchen's Wacky Quiz.
All right.
I'm going to ask 4 rapid fire
Okay.
questions. Gretchen's going to ask you for your favorite thing in Toledo, and Matt's going to ask you to describe the region in exactly 9 words.
Let's do it. Oh wow, that's
I randomly draw a card out of our rapid fire questions, and they always surprise me how applicable they are. What is the worst job you could have?
The worst job I could have, something where I'm alone and not talking to anybody. I don't know what that is. I guess let's say, I was going to say telemarketing, but that would not, I'd be talking to somebody.
Yeah.
But I've done telemarketing and it was not great.
If you could be any flavor of ice cream, which flavor would you be?
I would be peanut butter cup.
Yes.
What were the last 2 books you read?
The last 2 books. So I'm reading a series right now, and it's called Dungeon Crawler Carl, and those are the last 2 books that I read, both in that series.
Wow. Okay.
I would say cool, but I wouldn't mean it.
What do you think is an important life lesson?
An important life lesson is don't overstress about things, and that is something I'm still learning every day.
Great lesson. What's your number 1 most favorite, or what you would describe as the best thing in our city?
The food. I love the restaurants. There's so many good options, and there are new ones forming every day. So I love the restaurants around here.
All right. 9 words to describe the Toledo or the region.
Okay.
These could be fact or fiction, doesn't matter.
Oh, but I have all of them at my disposal. So a city that does not give up on itself.
Wow. And the bonus.
Yeah.
That is a great answer.
Best one so far.
It's a very resilient community, Toledo.
Yeah. You already answered. Don't,
Stop.
you
You
don't,
get 9.
there's no more extra
Come on
points.
now. Yeah.
Subcategory.
That's right.
Thank you so much
Thanks for having me.
being on the program and for the work you're doing. As you got cool things going on, be it fact or fiction, come on the
down.
program. Yeah, love it. Thank you very much, Zach Huber, Toledo Lucas County Public Library. When we come back, we'll be joined by Steve Miller, the general manager of the Huntington Center, with some great ways that we can be a tourist right here in Toledo, courtesy of our friends from Destination Toledo. We'll be right back.
Support for the 419 comes from Witro Wealth Management, where we understand that your financial path is personal. Advisory services are offered through Capital Investment Advisory Services, LLC. Securities offered through Capital Investment Group, Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. More information at WitroAdvisors.com.
WorkSpring. HR issues and employee well-being go hand in hand. WorkSpring supports employers through compliance, training, and wellness, because healthy workplaces don't happen by accidents. Learn more at workspring.org.
Toledo Refining Company, a subsidiary of PDF Energy. Toledo Refining Company is a supplier of fuels that keep our region moving. Located in Oregon, Ohio, the refinery processes crude oil into gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and other petroleum products.
And TARTA, celebrating its 55th year of connecting Northwest Ohioans to their community. More information at tarta.com.
Welcome back into the 419. Our friends at Destination Toledo encourage you to be a tourist here in Toledo, whether you live in Toledo or not, and there's some great opportunities to do that. We're joined now by Steve Miller, the general manager of the Huntington Center, the Glass City Center, Stranahan Theater. Have you added anything else since last we talked?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
He's taking over this studio as
Oh,
well.
all right, perfect. And the general manager of the 419.
Yeah.
What is that role entail? What is GM?
Why have you done this to yourself?
Yeah, right. Well, we talked with the Stranahan Theater about 2 years ago about trying to help out there. They had some challenges with some capital stuff. They've had some challenges with some staffing and really wanted to take the Stranahan to the next level. And so we were able to come to an agreement because we're a management company, right? So I work for Lucas County for the Huntington Center and the Glass City Center, but I don't work for Lucas County. I'm a manager for a private management company. And the same thing at the Stranahan Theater. The Stranahan Theater Trust owns the Stranahan Theater, and they wanted a professional management company to come in and run that. And so there's a general manager out there. His name's Joe Santiago. He's doing a great job for us out there, but I supervise the theater and help out there. And then the Huntington Center and the Glass City Center, it's amazing that we're in the 18th season of Toledo Walleye Hockey.
How about that?
And I came here in 2008 to open that building.
From where?
From Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Sure, all right.
And it's been a fun run. There's been a lot of fun stuff that's come through the facilities. We just did a $70 million renovation of the convention center, thanks to the Lucas County Board of Commissioners committing to that. And so now the convention business is starting to pick up. There's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, obviously I can toot your horn a little bit with the Metro Parks doing the stuff across the river from us. That's just another thing for tourists to do when they come to visit us and do their business in the convention center and have their fun outside.
Sure, and that is in tandem, potentially for one of the first times in our region, right? I mean, we do plan and design based on what we think this should look like, congruent with one another. But Steve, what was little Steve Miller like? Were you organizing things your whole life? Were you always a great manager of time
Putting
and
on
space?
shows?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, are you a sports enthusiast? Do you go to shows? What little free time you've now allowed yourself?
Well, I can tell you just a quick 30-second history is I'm from a small town in Michigan called Homer, Michigan. Everyone calls me Homer Simpson.
I love Homer.
Yes. So I went to the University of Michigan. I was the first person since 1980, if you remember Greg Barton, who was the Olympic kayaker that won gold medal in 84 and 88.
I love Greg Barton.
He's from Homer, Michigan. But
you're kidding me.
I was the first person to go to there since he went in 1980, so in 10 years. And
that's a big deal.
It was overwhelming for me.
Yeah, sure.
Coming from a small town of...
How small is small? I mean, how big is Homer?
About 1,600. I graduated, my class was 72 people.
How about
so
that?
it was pretty small, and I got to Michigan and really had a awakening.
Shock. Yeah.
Because I wasn't ready for college. And I came home, my mom actually was a school teacher in Homer, and she was my teacher for 2.5 years for certain subjects because the school was so small, there wasn't another teacher to teach it. And I came home with a C-, a C, and a B, and my mom went, "What the heck happened to you?" And I said, "Well, it's hard."
Yeah, right.
And so I gravitated to sports. I was an above average athlete, wasn't a great athlete, but I played football, basketball, and baseball in high school, and walked onto the Michigan baseball team and threw 5 throws from the outfield and took 10 swings, and Bill Freehan was the coach at the time, and he said, "Son, we really appreciate you coming out, but we won't need your services."
Sure, yeah.
So I got into the sport management side, and so I drove the Zamboni for hockey games at Michigan for 2.5 years, and got into the sports and entertainment world, and then kind of pivoted with one of my professors at Michigan who pushed me to Ohio University. But believe it or not, in Athens, Ohio, the Ohio University Sports Administration program is the #1 program in the country.
Interesting.
And Athens, Ohio.
Were you ready for that jump?
I was ready for that jump at the time,
Yeah.
and then I ended up working for the Charlotte Hornets for a little bit, and then ended up in Grand Rapids.
What year were you with the Hornets?
I was with the Hornets in '95.
Okay.
They were on a consecutive sellout streak. I think the last I remember, they were at about 930 in a row that they had sold out.
That's post Larry Johnson Morning?
That was with Larry Johnson. He was there.
Okay.
And Alonzo Mourning, they were the stars at the time.
Yeah, so that was Muggsy Bogues.
Muggsy Bogues.
Yeah.
I played golf with Muggsy Bogues.
Yeah, he is 5'3", to everyone know, right? That's an
5'3" and can dunk.
Yeah, he could dunk a tennis ball.
Yeah, well, his dad.
Del
Curry. Yeah, it was his dad.
Yeah. Now you've actually played more defense on an NBA team than Del Curry did. That is an actual sports trivia fact.
So journey brings you to Toledo. You open up the Huntington Center.
Mm-hmm.
The community was not unilaterally excited about the transition from Storm to Walleye, but now 18 years later, it's safe to say that
hook, line, and sinker. No pun intended.
Nailed it.
What other things? So obviously we know hockey takes place in the Huntington Center.
Yes.
What other events and activities are happening there?
I mean, we're doing concerts, family shows. The Disney on Ice is the professional bull riding. We raced motorcycles there a couple weeks ago. We've got an event next Saturday called the Redneck Brawl. If you remember the old Tough Man competitions.
Of course.
So Michigan versus Ohio next Saturday is going to be in the building. So we've got some pretty unique things that take place. But my goal when I came to town is coming from Grand Rapids. They're kind of out on a little island, and so the routing, if you know the business, the routing is important. And we're 50 miles from downtown Detroit. So there's a challenge with us getting a lot of shows all the time, because if they play Detroit, the promoters think that the people are just going to drive to Detroit. And so it was my job to really educate the promoters that Toledo is its own market. And I think that we've had some very good success.
Absolutely.
And I think it's not just because of me, it's because of the staff taking care of folks, but it's also because Toledo sells tickets. They love to go to shows. And they sometimes buy at the last second, but they love to go. And so I think we've kind of punched above our weight a little bit in that we've gotten the Eagles, we've gotten Elton John twice, and we've gotten Luke Bryan, and gotten Chris Stapleton. We've gotten some pretty big acts that have been able to play our market because we sell tickets. And being able to convince the promoters to do that and the agents to do that has made a big difference in us being able to pick up the shows that we get.
I do want to talk a little about this, and I don't know if this would be boring to others. It's certainly not to me, but talk to me a little bit about the planning of this, or years out. First of all, how many years out ahead do you plan, Steve? And is day one of that planning on a whiteboard, or how do you fill a calendar?
Well, it starts out with the way our lease is set up with the Walleye. They get 3 weekends a month to send dates to the league for games. So that's why the majority of the Walleye games are on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays.
Okay.
And it's for them to be successful.
That's
they want
right.
to play on the weekends, right?
So those are locked in.
So they're not necessarily locked in, but they submit them to the league. I get 1 weekend a month to lock in, and so that's when I pick Disney on Ice and professional bull riding and monster trucks. And
where do you find the inventory of things that are available?
Well, the family show inventory is pretty easy because those are every year events.
Okay.
The concerts typically book anywhere from 4 months to about a year and a half out, and it's all a function of routing. It's all a function of what's playing Detroit, unfortunately for us, and making sure that we're able to, if we get the show on a Wednesday, as an example, maybe they play Detroit in 45 days, so there's a little bit of separation between the events, and then just working on the calendar to route those events, because everybody wants to be on a Friday and Saturday. If every day was a Friday and Saturday, I'd probably be sitting at home doing nothing.
Right.
But it's not that way.
Yeah.
And so we're playing shows.
That's how I live my life, Steve. Like every day's a Friday and Saturday.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we're working to get the shows into the building, and typically we get Wednesdays, Thursdays, and sometimes Fridays. It's rare that we get Saturdays unless the Walleye schedule happens to fall where they're on the road that weekend, because they always submit those dates to the league. They submit 60 dates, and then they get 36 confirmed dates, and then we release all those dates and we try and fill the rest of them.
What's the quickest turnaround that you've ever done for between events?
The quickest turnaround that we've ever done, well, in Toledo, we haven't done what we call a quick change, but when I was in Grand Rapids, we had a basketball team and a hockey team, and so we would play basketball at 1 and we'd play hockey at 7:30.
Holy cow.
And so when the game would end at 3 o'clock, we'd have an army of people, about 60 people, to go out, and we would flip the rink in about 2.5 hours.
But in Homer, there's only 12 people, so you guys are constantly doing everything all the time. So you are perfectly.
That's right, and that's when I'm out there slinging glass and making sure it works.
You're the mayor and the fire chief.
So talk about Hunting Center, Glass City Center, massive renovation. It's a beautiful facility.
Yes.
You've done a wonderful job with that. The ballroom is incredible. I just love the concept of that renovation. Where the ballroom is now, that has what I think might be one of the best views of Fifth Third Field in our community, of that balcony there overlooking the ballroom. But that was unused space above
our loading dock.
Yeah, and now it's this beautiful facility. What types of events are coming into Glass City Center?
Well, the ballroom was a game changer. Originally, when we were designing this renovation, the ballroom was going to be on Summit Street, out in that motor court between the old Seagate Hotel and the new Hiltons now. Their ballroom was going to go there. Well, then they realized that, and you don't really notice it, but the slope is about 9 feet from the floor of the convention center to the road. So there would have been a 9-foot wall on Summit Street, and would have kind of been uninviting and wouldn't have looked well. And so the consultants that we worked with said, well, why don't you just put it above the loading dock? This makes sense. And we're kind of like, wow, why did we think of that?
That's what I said. That's right. I've been
saying that for years.
Yeah, and it's really been a game changer, because we've been able to get a lot of great conferences and conventions, and our food and beverage revenue was increased. We were doing about $850,000 in food and beverage revenue before we opened it, and we're doing over $2 million now. And so it's really made a big difference. I mean, obviously, with you being the former president of the Rotary Club, I mean, we do all of our Rotary meetings on Mondays. And honestly, that's helped us sell the ballroom, because there's a lot of business people that have fundraisers, things are going on, and they're like, wow, this is a great space.
Steve, it is such a complicated business, right? I mean, you have so many different moving parts, and you need so many bodies to execute all this. Just out of curiosity, what is the sheer number of people that work in all the venues that you oversee?
Well, we have in the Huntington and Glass City Center, we have 42 full-time employees. That includes our maintenance staff, operations staff, and then we have about 350 part-time seasonal employees. That includes concessions workers, part-time cleaning staff, changeover and operations people that help out. It is an interesting business in that everyone thinks that there's so many people doing the work, and there's just not that many full-time people, because in our business we can go 5 or 6 weeks in a row and then maybe have 3 weeks off.
Yeah, sure.
And so you've got to kind of manage that process, and it can be challenging at times, because right now is really our busy time. Believe it or not, it's freezing cold, but we're really busy.
Yeah, tell me, what does Steve Miller's downtime look like? I mean, how do you disconnect? Or are you just incapable of doing that? mean, you're only 26 years old. You look terrible.
Right. I'm pretty incapable of doing it. I'll be honest. I guess in my spare time, I'm an official. I work high school football, high school basketball, and I umpire Division I college baseball. And actually, I'm on the sub list for the Mud Hens. I do 2 or 3 Mud Hens games a year usually.
So you are a baseball junkie.
I'm a baseball junkie. There's I think coming up on less than 2 weeks before spring training starts. I can't wait.
There you go. Are you a Tigers fan?
I'm a huge Tigers fan.
Okay,
they disappoint me every year, but yes, I'm a huge Tiger fan.
Yeah. All
yes.
right.
And Steve is a fantastic official. I've had a chance to see, I think, some basketball and I know football games. You do a wonderful job with that. That is a, I mean, truly thankless job.
I was going to ask Steve, of all these things, at the risk of putting you on the spot here, what you and I run each other with some regularity in our lives. What you are great at this. What characteristics makes you good at this?
At officiating?
No, the whole ball.
Oh.
Yeah.
You know, I think you've got to be organized. Mm-hmm. You've got to have people skills. Mm-hmm. You've got to be able to work with your employees because I guess I'm one of the old school employees that works all the time.
Yeah.
You know, if you put in a 15-hour day, I still show up the next day at 8 o'clock. It's probably not very smart, but I still do. And our younger folks that we have now are smart, and they budget their time appropriately.
They have a balance.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
And I get frustrated sometimes because they're off.
Right.
And I want an answer to something that I can't get right away, and then I have to think, well, you know what? They're probably the smart people.
That's right.
They're having fun and doing things. And again, I have a lot of fun. I've been married to my wife. We'll be coming up on 30 years in June, and she puts up with it.
Yeah.
And understands it and gets frustrated with it sometimes.
Certainly, yeah.
But she's been great. She's been the rock for all of us. You know, we've had 2 daughters that we've raised, and
now where are they?
One lives in Guam. She's a marine ecologist in Guam.
Okay.
She's getting her master's degree. And then
we're sponsored by the Guam Convention.
I was going to say,
perfect.
It was a previous joke on the show,
Yeah.
but do you actually know the capital of Guam?
Is it Tuman?
No, we have no idea.
Okay.
Yeah. This isn't that show. This is not an educational show.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You can say anything.
The fact and fiction guy just left.
I was just there 2 weeks ago visiting her, and it was great. It was 85 and sunny, but the 14.5-hour flight from Detroit to Seoul was
What's
tough.
the best snack to buy at a walleye game, and what's the number one thing you would say? Someone's going to book a convention, they're having a big dinner. What's something on your menu that you would recommend they absolutely have to order?
You know, the best thing at a walleye game, gosh, it's so funny that we just do. We're really good at hamburgers, hot dogs, nachos, and popcorn. I personally love our chicken fingers with fries. From a convention perspective, you know, I think that we're going to take care of you. We're going to make sure that you have a good time. We're going to make sure that everything is good. From a food and beverage perspective, you know, our chef does a really good risotto, believe it or not.
Sure.
And when you're making risotto for you and the 3 of us, it's one thing. When you're making it for 700 people, it's a little different.
Yeah.
It's magic.
Yeah, that's right.
You mentioned basketball. You're an official. Glass City Wranglers, professional basketball team here in Toledo, is now playing at the convention center.
Yes, they're going to be in one of our exhibit halls. We're setting that up. I believe the first game is February 27th.
All right.
We're really excited about having them in downtown, having some great conversation with Josh and his team. They're really excited about being downtown. I think that they think this is going to be a game changer for them. They've been playing at local high schools over the past few years and kind of jumping around, and they kind of want to make downtown their home. I think obviously their ultimate goal would be to end up moving over to the Huntington Center and playing over there. But we're going to take baby steps and grow this thing the right way, and Josh is really thinking this through.
We're coming up on the end of our time here today, but I'm curious, you know, we talk about tourism and being a tourist in and around Toledo. Folks that are attending, you know, walleye hockey games and concerts and, you know, Nate Bargatze and, you know, a record-setting attendance there, what's the radius that folks are coming from?
For hockey, it's really about a 60-mile radius, but for concerts, it pushes into 90 and 100-mile radiuses. I mean, we get a lot of people from Ann Arbor. We get a lot of people from south of Findlay and Lima area that come. I mean, the Nate Bargatze that just happened here last weekend was a 3, 4, 5-hour radius. Wow. And you know, with the weather that we had that came in, we got a lot of phone calls because people were driving that far, and you know, we still had 93% of the people show up, which is great.
That's great.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It looked like a great crowd. Yep.
Congratulations,
Yeah.
you're doing great work.
No kidding.
I mean, you've got 3 beautiful facilities that I enjoy visiting each one of them every time. So thank you for that. Thanks for being on the program. It's
great.
He's Steve Miller, the general manager of Huntington Center, Glass City Center, and oversees the Stranahan Theater as well. We appreciate you being on the program. When we come back, we'll wrap up this Tuesday edition of the 419.
Every day when you walk
You laughed with us. You learned with us.
My neighbor?
We made sure your childhood was special. Memories that could only be provided by PBS. For generations, we've given you programs that made a difference. Programs that entertained, informed, and inspired. And today is no different. This is WGTE Public Media in Toledo. It's where you belong.
Introducing The Local Thread, a community news series uniting voices and storytellers from across the region. In partnership with La Prensa, the Toledo Free Press, the Sojourner's Truth, Toledo Public Schools, and veteran journalist Jerry Anderson. The Local Thread brings you stories and conversations that connect our community. Hear it weeknights at 7 on FM 91 with early access on podcast platforms each morning. The Local Thread, only on WGTE.
Welcome back into the 419, wrapping up a Tuesday edition of the show. Man, just another good day talking to good people. I'm curious. So Steve Miller manages, some of the coolest facilities in our region. Curious, what was the last big event you attended in the Huntington Center, Glass City Center, or Stranahan Theater?
Huntington Center, I think, was a Rotary meeting, and Stranahan was the Nutcracker, December.
Glass City Center, or the Huntington?
Glass City Center, yeah.
Huntington, did you go to the?
No, I didn't. I didn't make it.
All right.
Huntington, I took. It was a walleye game, and it was packed. I made it to the national anthem before Ruby, my youngest, decided that this was not for her. And I would say from Stranahan, the last time I was there, I got to perform with one of our previous guests in the Nutcracker. So I got to be part of that show, which was a wonderful honor, and got to see a little bit of behind the scenes of how all of that functions, as Steve mentioned today. And although he's been doing it for a long time, and Steve is a humble guy, but the overwhelming amount of orchestration that happens with a relatively small staff, like, as he mentioned, is really interesting to me.
And I don't know that I've ever seen him stressed, right? I just think there's and maybe some of that's what helps him be a sports official as well. Is just that being able
I wanted to
kind
see
of
if he still drove the Zamboni. I forgot to ask him that.
We'll have to ask. That's a good question.
Yeah.
Do you want to drive the Zamboni?
I do.
Yeah, me too.
I would totally. Or they let kids sometimes sit on that little seat in the front.
We do as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the ribbon.
Yeah.
People love Zambonis.
They do.
An odd love affair.
Is it, the Zamboni at the ribbon? Is it a normal size Zamboni, or did you have to get it custom made?
Yeah, it's a normal size Zamboni. Yeah.
It's not a test of masculinity.
Yeah. It's an average size Zamboni. What a rude.
Also had a great conversation with Zach Huber from the library. Certainly I'm excited about his new role and what that means for him in the library. But he did incredible work with the Small Business Center, and that's just a really cool kind of service and resource for our library that we don't regularly think about.
I also like the thread between our guests, and just a coincidence, but probably not an uncommon story, from smaller towns have come to a big place, certainly bigger than they're familiar with. Everyone talks about the downsides to a small town, but this is Coldwater, Ohio, then Anderson, Indiana, Homer, Michigan, and found that Northwest Ohio is the best place to live, work, and play, which of course is the premise of this program.
Well, and both individuals helping us sort of punch above our weight as a community as well, right? With,
well said.
a absolute award-winning library and real class act facilities that are bringing from a convention center. Without that renovation, we're not getting some of the events and conventions that come into our community that drive revenue, hotel stays, all of that.
I'm going to make you both sign up for the winter read at the library.
All right, so we're going to skip right past that. Let's see what happens. If you missed any part of the show, 3 good opportunities to catch it. 7 a.m. on WGTE's YouTube channel, 3 p.m. on FM 91, and 6 p.m. on WGTE Connect's Thanks for being a part of the program as well. This is the 419, powered by WGTE, presented by Witro Wealth Management.
The 419, powered by WGTE, is made possible in part by supporters like you. Thank you.